So we'll open this special council meeting. We're squeaking by with quorum here, so we'll go with that. And I need a mover and a seconder for the approval of the agenda. And I'm not going to read all that because there's nobody here. So we had a amended recommendation to add one item on to the approval of the agenda tonight, a walk-on. I know we don't like to do that, but it was a fairly short report, so hopefully it'll be all right. And that's moved by Councillor Van Berkel and seconded by Councillor Orsatti. All those in favor? That's carried. And we will move into closed session. Oh, first, if anybody has any disclosures, seeing none. And we'll have a motion to go into closed session, and that's moved by Deputy Mayor Davidson and seconded by Councillor Ices. All those in favor? That's carried. And off we go. So I need a mover and a seconder to rise and report at 6:58 p.m. That's Councillor Fowler and Councillor Ices. All those in favor? That's carried. Next, we have our closed session item 1, direction to staff, moved by Councillor Van Berkel and seconded by Councillor Ices. All those in favor? That's carried. And closed session item number 2, direction is moved by Deputy Mayor Davidson and seconded by Councillor Sadi. All those in favor? That's carried. The confirming bylaw is moved by Deputy Mayor Davidson, seconded by Councillor Fowler. All those in favor? And we're not going to be able to adjourn tonight because Councillor Nichols on holiday, and he always moves adjournment. So Councillor Van Berkel is and Councillor Sadi is moving for adjournment. All in favor? That is carried. We'll just wait 1 minute until the 7 o'clock and we can start our regular council meeting. Councillor Van Berkel, I feel like you're way over there. If you want to move over, you can.
I'm afraid it's, what is it, coronavirus? I feel like when I was here 20 years.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, members of council, members of staff, and most importantly, those here in the audience. Thank you very much for coming out on a very snowy evening to be here tonight for our council meeting. I'm sure there's probably a lot of people watching online tonight, so they didn't have to brave the roads. So we appreciate you being here as well. And you'll see that the Deputy Mayor and I are donned in our pink tonight because of its anti-bullying day. So with that, I would declare the meeting open and ask if you do have an electronic device with you, if you could please set it to silent so that it doesn't interrupt our audio. And also to let you know that during this meeting, we are audio and video recording, and this shall form part of the record, which is retained by the town's retention bylaw in accordance with that. And for more information, you can contact the clerk's office if you need more information about that bylaw. So we have a agenda that we would like to approve for this evening. We're going to do open forum, and we'll have anyone who is speaking on items that are on the agenda first, and then we will go to approval of the agenda. So tonight on open forum, our first speaker is Candace Zavarella, and it's regarding the real property acquisition policy. Candace, whenever you're ready. If you could take 2 or 3 minutes per speaker, that would be wonderful.
Madam Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the council, my name is Candace Zavarella. I own 441, 430.
I don't want to interrupt, but you just get a little bit closer. I think we could hear you all better. Thank you.
I own 441 and 439 Limerick Street and 1557 Shore Acres Drive. I stood before you last on December 15th regarding a policy that you were voting on that night, which had some flaws. I spoke to those flaws as a taxpayer and an accountant. Council noted my concerns as well as their own and consequently requested that item 14 be revised or stricken. Well, I am here again tonight because I have read the revision for agenda item C2 tonight, and it's not much has changed. In fact, it's almost identical, so the concerns still stand. I reiterate, allowing the CAO to have carte blanche buying power of $2 million with no safeguards and no parameters as to what is to be purchased from a developer-funded account is a red flag because of the potential for embezzlement and abuse of power. There are no parameters to this policy or safeguards for the citizens. The unelected CAO will have unilateral decision-making power circumventing our democratically elected leaders. We cannot have this, as it will set a precedent for future such policies. Just because council will have the option to accept or reject the purchase after an offer is made is of poor consequence. If council rejects an offer, think of the PR problems that will entail. Will there be a financial consequence? I don't think council could reject an offer without being vilified for it, and that puts pressure on council that is undue, and it is unacceptable. If council still must approve non-waterfront property, should waterfront property not be held to the same scrutiny? The CAO is going from a $10,000 threshold to a $2 million threshold, which is a huge variance. It's a good idea. If it's a good idea and within the scope of Innisfil's growth plan, then surely a report can be whipped up and a closed-door council meeting held. Reading the policy in its entirety, the CAO has the ability at his sole discretion to initiate expropriation if an owner doesn't want to sell. With that, my concern is the citizen will not have the ability to plead their case to council and will have to go to the expense of hiring a lawyer to fight for them in an expropriation hearing. That is not right, and that's why we have council, is to be able to speak to them. Many people have had their land for generations on this lake, long before Innisfil was slated for growth. Most waterfront owners have cottages or have been allowed to build their dream homes there. These people have left big cities that cater to developers and their backroom deals and have come to live in a peaceful place, to raise their children in an environmentally healthy and safe place. What are the parameters to waterfront purchases? Is everyone who owns a home, myself included, a target for the CAO to take our homes? My family has been here for 3 generations, and my children are the 4th. Heritage Forest surrounds our street and we have a unique environment that we share nature with. I sit in my breakfast area and I look out at bald eagles in my neighbor's tree. Where else can I do that? The people on the waterfront pay the highest residential tax rates in Innisfil. That's because our land has the highest values. So effectively, when you buy up all the waterfront land, you erode your tax base. Are our property values going to go down now because all of us will be targets for this land purchase plan? Or is there just a select group of places? The people on the Where is the clause that excludes the CAO from a conflict of interest purchase? This should not be limited to family, but friends as well. Furthermore, a $2 million cash in lieu account is where this money is supposed to be coming from. That is funded by a developer fund, and that fund has $3.5 million at the last meeting and can be replenished by another fund. The fact that a developer can place funds in an account and the town use it to buy prime waterfront land is concerning, to say the least. I implore council to think long and hard before passing this policy. You are giving up our free and democratic right to a bureaucrat and setting a policy that has the huge potential to erode our democratic system. We as citizens and taxpayers elect you to protect us and to represent our needs. We need some assurances and some safeguards. So Ms. Dahlin and fellow councilors, I implore you, please do not pass this policy as it is written. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Joann Mcconnell, and it's on the same item.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and councillors. I have been a resident in Guildford for over 25 years. I would like to share some concerns I have regarding the proposed changes to the property acquisition policy, which will give the CAO unlimited authority to purchase waterfront properties worth up to $2 million without prior council approval. Why is the focus of the CAO only on waterfront properties? Aren't all property purchases in the town potentially time sensitive? How can the town justify giving a single person not elected by the residents the authority to make purchases of this magnitude without approval from council? The fact that this money is not taxpayer money does not minimize the amount of consideration it should be given. I find the large increase from the former policy to $2 million for a single purchase alarming. This is essentially a blank check for the CAO with money being used from a potentially unlimited source, developer funds. This could be considered a conflict of interest, as developers could pressure the CAO to obtain certain parcels of waterfront and also provide the funds to purchase those. While this may not be the intention, the public view is one of corruption and potential backroom deals. Will there be a cap on the number of $2 million purchases that can be authorized? Or as long as the money exists in the developer fund, then the CAO is free to continue to make as many purchases as he sees fit? At what point will council question the amount of money being funneled through the system? And will they be able to do anything to stop it if this policy is passed? Involving council after an offer has been accepted is too late. Council will be under pressure to approve the purchase or risk legal action against the town for trying to back out of a deal. Removing council from the acquisition process goes against the expectations of residents that council represent their best interests. Waterfront properties in our neighborhood are often on the market for months, sometimes a year more, before being sold. There is more than enough time to call an emergency meeting of council to consider potential offers without jeopardizing the town's position in the negotiation process. I hope that council will reject this revised policy. Removing council from the upfront negotiation process hands all of the power to one person. No single town employee should have this kind of authority. We have elected council to represent us and ensure that the town's dealings are transparent with checks and balances in place to protect our best interests. I appreciate you taking the time to hear my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. McConnery. Next is Diane Sykes, and this is in regarding the Innisfil Beach Park Master Plan.
Council, worship, and staff. I'm the third generation to enjoy Lake Simcoe and Innisfil Beach Park for their natural beauty. The park has a very tiny lakefront footprint, only 1,050 meters of shoreline. Right now, it can be enjoyed by all people with no discrimination based on culture, age, ability, or finances. Innisfil's population is presently 36,566 people. Of those people, only 23 voted yes on expanded dock. Between 2019 and 2021, the cost of these expansions is $2,538,000. How do you justify these costs to a population with food and housing insecurities who have clearly voted that they do not want the Port of Innisfil or a marina at their park? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sykes. That concludes our items on the open forum this evening. So all of those two items, C1 and C2, will be coming up if you want to stick around and hear if there's any debate on those items this evening. And with that, I will, I apologize, sent regrets. Councillor Payne is home ill this evening, and Councillor Nicol and Councillor Waters are away on vacation. So we have quorum, so as long as the rest of us hang out, we'll be good. And I'll be asking at this point if we could have an approval of the agenda. We had one item that's been added to the agenda tonight, item 6.1, which is the draft Innisfil Beach Park Master Plan, which Mr. Pierce will be making a delegation on. So that's moved by Councillor Van Berkel and seconded by Councillor Fowler to be approved with that addition. All in favor? That's wonderful. Now that we have an approved agenda, do we have any disclosures of interest on the agenda this evening? Seeing none, if one becomes apparent to you or if the conversation wavers, please feel free to make it known at that time. And our first presentation tonight, we're happy to welcome Janice Scott from RVH, the president and the CEO, and our very own Barbara Love, who is one of the board members, to do a presentation on the capital planning project. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. A very snowy good evening. My name is Barbara Love, and I am a very proud and enthusiastic member of the Royal Victoria Regional Health Centre Board of Directors. This evening, I'm joined by Janice Scott, the RVH President and CEO, and we're pleased to have the opportunity to come before you again to provide another update to our long-range expansion plan. Many of you know, as a longtime Innisfil resident, I've been a strong advocate for bringing healthcare closer to home for Innisfil residents. Most recently, I was thrilled to take on the role of the honorary fundraising chair of the Rizzardo Health and Wellness Center. We know that the town's health report, which was prepared by York University and Georgian College several years ago, reported that access to health care is a top concern for residents of Innisfil. And that's why RVH has engaged in a 2-year long-range planning exercise that's been very comprehensive and very thorough. The town of Innisfil has been very involved in our planning since the beginning through Mayor Dolan and CAO Jason Rayner, who sits on the Capital Planning Committee. We're very appreciative of their insight and their perspective. Since we last spoke with Council and also with Innisfil's Community Health Committee and Sandy Cove Acres residents, RVH's vision has continued to evolve. RVH's plan will ensure residents receive the health care they need and deserve as South Simcoe County continues to grow. We're very excited about this ambitious plan, and we know that you will be too. The first step in our graduated plan has already started. In December, as you know, RVH opened a variety of outpatient clinics at the Rizzardo Health and Wellness Center. You'll see several of us up on the picture. RVH leases 5,000 square feet of space in the center where we offer a variety of clinics for children and adults, including preschool speech-language pathology, preschool occupational therapy, preschool autism diagnostic clinics, infant hearing screening, pediatric asthma clinics, low-risk stroke clinics, internal medicine clinics, COPD clinics. And we continue to expand the clinics in the coming months, including an urgent geriatric care clinic and an adult asthma clinic. RVH's clinics also provide some cardiac diagnostics such as echocardiogram, electrocardiogram, and Holter monitoring. We also offer cardiac rehab at the YMCA right next door. A wide range of RVH clinical staff work out of the RVH Health and Wellness Clinic, including doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, cardiac diagnostic techs, respiratory therapists, speech-language pathologists, and occupational therapists. Although the individual clinic schedules vary, RVH space is opened weekdays 8 till 4. Since we opened, the RVH clinics have logged over 600 patient visits. Innisfil patients and their families are so appreciative of having care closer to home. Like little Tiago Rodriguez, who's in the picture that you can see, along with the RVH pediatric staff. We heard from one Innisfil mother who used to spend 2 hours getting to and then another 2 back from Innisfil, getting to RVH, and she is very relieved to have the clinic open. Our patients are almost as enthusiastic as Mayor Dolan. Thanks also to councillors who joined us for our opening last month, including Bill Van Berkel, Donna Orsatti, and Kenneth Fowler. I'd like to now pass the podium over to Janice Scott, RVH President and CEO.
Thanks very much, Barbara, and good evening, Mayor Dolan, members of council. Thanks for having us back again this year. And we're really excited to present an update on our planning documents. When I look at this first slide, I think really, and look at council, I'm preaching to the converted because you, better than many of us, know about the population explosion that's going to be coming our way in both in terms of further north into Springwater, Barrie Annex lands, Alcona, and of course areas south of that. So we know that Simcoe story is a story of growth, it's of progress, and it's of innovation. So over 74,000 more people will be in Innisfil alone, and that doesn't even include Friday Harbor. So the total population of the area coming to us over the next 2 decades is 173,000 people. It's a bit like taking Oshawa and moving it all into our community all at one time. But the total population, which is actually 370,000 people, would be closer to London, Ontario. And if you're familiar with London, you know that there are two major health organizations, the London Health Science Centre and St. Joe's, but they have multiple sites. So the point really being that the single site up at RVH North Campus will certainly not suffice for what we know is coming in terms of population growth. But it's not just about growth, it's also about aging, and we have an aging population. The growth rate is faster than the provincial average, and in 25 years, Simcoe County will have over 107,000 seniors, more seniors, representing more than 30% of the population. And why is that significant for hospitals? It's significant because, on average, seniors use 4 times the amount of hospital resources as the rest of the population. In addition to that, of course, about half of the provincial health budget is dedicated to seniors. So when we think about growth plus an aging population, we know we have some tremendous challenges ahead of us. So we've talked about growth of population, aging of population, but as well, there are also a number of health risk factors that unfortunately we also have to identify because they have a huge impact on the use of hospital resources. So habits such as smoking and drinking, not exercising, not eating a proper diet, all mean that our fellow residents throughout Simcoe County are not as healthy as our provincial counterparts. In fact, 45% of our residents today have a chronic condition, and 1 in 5 of those residents have multiple chronic conditions. And we do know that chronic conditions lead to more hospitalizations at an earlier age, but also for a longer period of time. So it's incumbent upon all of us to really focus on prevention and wellness and ensure that maybe the health problems that we foresee will become the problems of the past, and that hopefully people will be living longer, but also not in need of a hospital as often. We also know the hospital of the future will be greatly impacted by the excitement and the growth of technology. It'll play a key role in RVH's hospital of the future. It could be artificial intelligence or 3D printing. Technology is going to transform how healthcare is delivered, and certainly the RVH of the future will not be the RVH of today. We know that more care will be provided on an outpatient basis. Really, there are also advances in virtual healthcare, meaning that consultation and follow-up can be done outside of the hospital. RVH's South Campus will focus on outpatient care in the first decade. But neither technology nor prevention efforts will alleviate the need for beds. Population growth combined with our aging population means the demand for beds will continue. Because the reality is, today at RVH, we're bursting at the seams. Every day we're full. The occupancy rate is between 115 to 135% some days. And when the beds are full, it creates a gridlock throughout the hospital. Patients end up waiting for beds in the emergency department, and wait times grow. Last year, that meant over 3,000 patients were cared for in hallways, quiet rooms, temporary surge beds, makeshift care spaces with no windows and no private washrooms. And this is not the care that RVH wants to provide for anyone, and it's certainly not the kind of care we want to provide for any of our loved ones. So now imagine that with the dire situation we'd have if we put on top of that 173,000 more people. That's why we need to have an expansion plan now. And we've designed a graduated model that will allow us to bring care closer to home as soon as possible. We also wanted to highlight for you some of the wait times that we're currently facing, because we know that this really has an impact on all of our residents in South Simcoe as well as Barrie. For example, at RVH, hip replacement is almost a year wait time, whereas the target is 182 days. Knee replacement, 2/3, 3/4 of a year. Cataracts as well. The only area with next to sort of the provincial targets that we are keeping pace with would be our cancer surgery wait times. And if you're waiting for an MRI that's booked, you can wait 120 days, and CT 53 days. This is because the population growth and the demand with the aging population and less than healthy habits means that the demand for these services is much greater in Barrie and South Simcoe. Even in our ED department, a patient will wait almost 5 hours to be seen, and I probably have stories here in other places where they waited longer, but those are our statistics. And what we're trying to achieve is about 1.7 hours. So it's not the care that we want to provide, and we know that we need to expand immediately. In order to ensure that our processes were well followed at RVH, we always have a strong governance structure. As Barbara mentioned, she's a member of the board of directors and representing Charlotte Wallace tonight. Thank you, Barbara. And the board developed a capital planning committee. It's chaired by our second vice chair, Doug Frost. In addition to the board members, of course, on the capital planning committee, we've also included municipal representation from County of Simcoe, City of Barrie, Town of Innisfil, and the Town of Bradford, West Gwillimbury, as well as a member of our LIN, our Local Health Integration Network. Doug Frost, who is the chair, we anticipate having Doug around for another 7 years. Maybe he hasn't read his fine print yet as a volunteer board member. But our hope is that not only will he continue on our board, continue chairing this committee, but see the projects, many of them, to fruition. After that, there's a Capital Planning Advisory Committee, and this is the committee that I have the privilege of chairing. We advise the Capital Planning Committee. Not only do we have our senior leadership team on this committee, but as well our volunteers, staff, physicians from our hospital, physicians from a community, and a patient advisor as well. And I really want to take an opportunity to recognize Ben Peterson, our Executive VP, who's been leading the entire capital projects. Thanks, Ben. To the right of that, you can see the South Campus Site Selection Committee. Of course, this one would be of great interest to the council here this evening. And not only do we have members of our board again on the South Campus Site Selection Committee, but we've also added 2 members from our community. One from Innisfil, Chris Garraby, who was a past chair of our board and past chair of the Capital Redevelopment Steering Committee, and Dan McLean, who lives in Springwater, was also a past member of Simcoe County. So this group, and then that little orange square at the bottom really represents hundreds and hundreds of people who have given their time and effort, physicians, staff, nurses, and volunteers, to working groups to make sure that the plan was in fact effective and very, very detailed. So in order to move forward, we have in fact a 2-campus integrated model that has been developed. As Barbara mentioned, the first step was our graduated model in December when we opened clinics in the Rizzardo Health and Wellness Center. Over the next 10 years, RVH will invest more than $14 million into this health and wellness center. It clearly not only allows people to stay off the highway and receive outpatient care, adult and pediatric, closer to home, but it also does really ensure that RVH's South Campus is secure in this area, as we are your go-to hospital. Next, we will begin to renovate and redevelop spaces within the current facility, including emptied shell units that were built as part of the 2012 expansion. This is known as the pre-tower phase of our project. With this phase alone, which we'd like to complete within 6 years, we'll be able to add 91 new beds, and therefore we will once again assist with government with ending hallway medicine by adding more beds to our North Campus. This is within current spaces that are already there, shelled in and ready to proceed. Within 10 years, we will complete the South Campus Health Hub, and this is a structure I'll talk a little bit more about. At the same time, we're going to develop the North Campus Tower. All of this with an eye to, beyond the 10-year period, the South Campus having post-acute care beds. These are beds such as rehabilitation beds, complex beds that will allow us to have patients on this site, but they won't be dependent upon the type of beds you would have with a 24/7 emergency department, which would have an intensive care unit and a number of other auxiliary services to support it. That's the last step, which is really the 20+, where the South Campus Hospital will be a 24/7, 365 hospital of the future, where all of the services that would be provided through that, having that H on the side of the building, and people from the far and wide, including the 400 and Yonge Street and beyond, will be able to come here for a full-service hospital. So with this approach, we believe that we'll be able to secure approvals in a reasonable time frame, we'll begin providing services as quickly as possible, and will increase the likelihood of approvals through manageable, discrete stages. This is a large project. We wanted to make sure that we put it in bite-sized pieces, in a sense, so the Government of Ontario could really envision, get their arms around, and be able to fund it relative to the number of demands that they face in healthcare throughout the province. Let's go right to the South Campus design. The South Campus will also be completed in stages, building on a graduated model. The first part, as I mentioned earlier, is the ambulatory health hub with an urgent care center, and within 10 years. This health hub will have surgical services. For example, today, of course, all cataracts are completed on an outpatient basis, but at RVH, we're also starting to complete our hip surgeries on an outpatient basis. So you can envision this health hub as being a very active. Ambulatory means no inpatient beds in that phase of the model, but a number of services being provided here on an outpatient basis. Then in 15 years, we'd add an inpatient unit, and as I mentioned earlier, it's not a unit that would be dependent on emerge, because that would be unsafe to put in place prior to, which is the last phase, and that is having this acute care hospital, 24/7 emergency department, and operating rooms that can operate around the clock, as well as intensive care. There could be a helicopter pad as well, so that it does become that full functioning facility, and choosing the property to ensure all that happens is, of course, very important. At maturity, the South Campus will house 285 inpatient beds, and this will include space for our partners so we can better coordinate care. An Ontario Health Team concept is the current word being used for that, but that would be a space in total, particularly the Health Hub piece, that would have other agencies under the umbrella of this physical plant and be able to provide care for patients in a more coordinated fashion. So the model you see here, of course, is just on a generic piece of property, not likely ever to find a full square property for our hospital, because we haven't yet determined the South Campus location yet. Our planning team is working very closely with the town of Innisfil and its planning department through many processes. We know that the South Campus will impact healthcare for generations to come. So it really is a once-in-a-lifetime decision for all of us. That's why our South Campus Site Selection Committee, which includes community representation, has spent over 2 years on a very thorough, fair, and transparent process. The committee started with 225 square kilometer search area. We chose the search area because we felt that a drive time to a hospital would be reasonable to be about 15 minutes. The primary area in that particular rectangle, all of those residents, a drive time to a hospital, whether it be Southlake or Stevenson, or even most of it up to RVH, is greater than the 15 minutes. So we chose that area as the area of our new hospital that wouldn't interfere with the great work our partner hospitals are doing, but really make healthcare more accessible for its residents. So you can see Lake Simcoe, west to Highway 400, Kempenfeld Bay, down to just below Highway 89. And I want to draw your attention to the green dot. That represents the 50 acres of land at Yonge Street and the 6th line that was generously donated to RVH by the Cortel Group back in 2009. And we are extremely grateful for the gift from the Cortel Group. This is obviously a close-up of the property on the 6th line with Yonge Street just to the east. And it is important to note that we're very, very grateful, but as well, we must also note that we are a publicly funded organization. And it's critically important that we put the land through the same thorough assessment, criteria, and analysis as we do every other property we're looking at in the 225 kilometers. I'm sure we all agree that it's vital that we choose the right site. So to help us narrow the search, we used very clear, weighted criteria, both mandatory and desirable, that were approved by our board of directors. Through that, it took us down to 47 sites for consideration. From there, we overlaid that there were 2,000 other data points to include current and future transportation networks, natural heritage systems and agricultural designations, community consultation, and site visits. Through that process, we were able to narrow our search down to 9 top-ranked sites. While we started with 5 zones within that area, we moved to 4 zones because the 9 potential sites just showed up in the 4 zones. And we've added the more recent development and vision that the council approved in the fall of 2019 regarding the orbit. So Zone 1 is the Highway 400 corridor. Zone 2 is South Barrie, North Stroud, Yonge Street corridor. Zone 3 is the South Stroud, Yonge Street corridor. And Zone 4 is the 6th line in Yonge Street. We then went back to our community to ask for feedback on an online survey. So I think what's important when we looked at that, and we also looked at how a hospital is actually compatible or not compatible with the built environment, there were a number of areas that we thought we should bring to everyone's attention that we have to take into account when we're building a hospital. For example, as a hospital, we have a number of hazardous materials, nuclear, radioactive, flammable, and explosive materials. Bio-waste, of course, from body parts, and hazardous waste as well. And all of those have to have dedicated storage requirements on site. With respect to utility services, we know we are high consumption organization of electricity, natural gas. We have shared services with the community, and we may cause disruption to services into surrounding communities. Not that we're ever intending that, but as a 24/7, 365 facility, this can happen. With respect to water and sewage, we are high users of water and sewage. This is a requirement for Government of Ontario that we have clear and easy access to a traditional method. Also, there's impact on municipalities for current and future hospital expansion demands. So whatever we build in 10 years from now, we've got to be taking into account that 20 and 30-year time frame as well. And of course, our demands could negatively impact the water and sewer services in surrounding communities. So all of these elements are really important as we're trying to also use the many reports that are before us to choose the right site for really a 50-year project. In addition to that, of course, there are benefits to where we locate a hospital. We know from research that, in fact, patient recovery can improve when a hospital is located far from dense urban activity and it's integrated with green spaces. And it too can have a very positive impact on patients' recovery, also the length of time it will take a patient to recover. There are challenges with respect to a hospital on impact on community environment. For example, this is very timely with respect to the coronavirus, but hospitals have a lot of germs in them. Patients and occupational exposures to nosocomial or hospital-based and acquired infections are just a part of the everyday life that we have at a place like RVH. It's a very noisy area to be beside or near a hospital. There are ambulances and helicopters and delivery vehicles and emergency generator equipment, and this can have an impact on the surrounding residential areas. Residential parking can be affected by staff and visitors occupying neighborhood spaces. And finally, there can be possible tensions, all of which we'll try to avoid between area residents and administration due to the mixed use of the surrounding areas. So we just wanted to really give you a sense of the number of elements we look at when we're trying to ensure that we've placed a hospital for the future in the right location. We also did receive feedback through a survey. Over 1,000 people commented on where they thought the optimum site for the South Campus would be. And over half of those who responded to the survey were from the Innisfil area. It's important to note, I think, that between the Highway 400 corridor and the Yonge Street corridor, that is where the majority, close to 3/4 of the respondents felt that would be the right location for a hospital. Fewer, of course, in Alcona area and even fewer in the donor land on Yonge Street and the 6th line. It was really just a way of engaging all of our residents in what we're doing for the future. And yet they also gave us some key feedback for consideration as we were trying to choose the location of the hospital. They thought it was important to have easy access from major roads, including Highway 400, multiple access points into the organization, and an alternative road access if Highway 400 is ever closed. Ability to service the site quickly and begin construction quickly. I think the residents of Innisfil would, if they could, they'd like to have had a hospital yesterday, and so they know they want us to get moving as soon as possible. The hospital should be close to existing or planned public transportation. We must take into account the impact on the surrounding community and residents, noise and traffic. We have to align with planned development population centers. There is an environmental impact they're concerned about, not too close to Lake Simcoe. Consider the impact on the wetlands. A central location to all populations to be served. That would mean Southbury, Alcona, the Highway 400 area, as well as the developments to the south. Close to amenities, access for emergency services, close to the new Rizzardo Health and Wellness Center, the community connection close to Innisfil Fire and the YMCA. Proximity to existing hospitals, about a 20-minute drive time is seen as reasonable to enable transfers between the two sites. Proximity to Sandy Cove and Friday Harbor, must be on the main arterial road other than 400, and additional land for expansion of other services was very important to consider. There were a long list of items. We thought we'd pull out a few tonight to let you know what your residents thought in terms of what was important to them for their hospital of the future. So just briefly on the North Tower, this is our current North Campus at RVH. You can see in the background, that's the building that opened in 1997. More of the foreground represents the 2012 expansion. And it's important to note that 60% of Innisfil residents receive their hospital care at RVH. And many will continue to go to the North Campus for more complex care needs. The North Campus expansion, broken down into a pre-tower and tower phase, will double the size of the Health Center of the North, again. So the first in the lime green color is what we call the pre-tower phase. This is where I mentioned that about 91 beds could be added. We'll see significant renovations and expansions through the health center, such as critical care, which is at full capacity most days, and maternal and child cancer clinic, mental health, and outpatient clinics will be developed. We'll also expand, as you can see, the building just to the bottom left-hand side of the screen is called Rotary Place. It's an administrative building, a lower cost to build, and we plan to double it so we can free up the clinical space that's necessary in the current building so that more clinical spaces can be developed there and non-clinical spaces can come out to Rotary Place. We'll then move into the tower phase, and this is construction of a 9-story tower, approximately 800,000 square feet of new space, including additional beds, but really focusing, it's hard to tell in the picture, but there's a deeper or a floor there, and that's really expanding our surgical services at RVH. There will also need to be, clearly we're taking up a lot more of the very precious land, and we'll have to have a parking strategy in place. So if the pre-tower and the tower phase could happen along with the South Campus Health Hub, we will have, and the rest of the South Campus will have a total of 943 inpatient beds between the two campuses. So you might ask, why is RVH even considering a South Campus location other than the donated land? And I want to say again, what's most important is that we choose the right location for the South Campus, and we are responsible as public servants to consider all options. So through our process, the donor land is always part of the discussion. But it's important to note that the cost of the land, which is the smallest blue dot at the bottom of the screen, is so small compared to the cost of construction, which is actually quite small compared to building a building and designing a building that keeps our maintenance costs in alignment. And of course, overall, what we really have our eye on will be the operational costs, the efficiencies that are required, because this is really in the 50-year hospital life cycle, the true cost of the project is really many years away. So even the cost of construction is small, as I've mentioned, and because we know even today at RVH with our building, it's $1 million a day to operate it. So we want to be keeping in mind always the longer range goal, the long plan, which is to ensure that we are keeping the operational costs in mind as we're moving toward this project. So we talked a lot about healthcare impact of the South Campus build and the North Campus expansion, but RVH's development will also have a huge economic driver as well. The number of staff and physicians has increased significantly since we opened our expansion, and we know most of them live in Simcoe County, here in Innisfil, as well as in Barrie. So this means they do a lot of their spending in our local economy, on houses, local groceries, restaurants, and other businesses. Hospitals also drive business around them, and the Georgian Drive used to be considered out in the country. I'm sure many of you were in the area when someone said, why are they putting a hospital up in the middle of nowhere in North Barrie? And look today of the amount of the economy that is developed around the hospital. So using a commonly used wage multiplier calculation, RVH's 18-19 payroll translates into an annual spin-off impact of $161 million to the local economy. So at maturity, with the South Campus built and the North Campus expanded, RVH will employ over 3,300 full-time staff. The economic spin-off from payroll alone, which doesn't include physicians' billings, will increase to $259 million in 2037, 2038. Simply put, having a hospital in your community is very good for business. And that economic impact doesn't factor in the construction period itself. We're just giving you an example that RVH's 2012 expansion required 1.7 million person-hours of construction work, and 80% of the tradespeople who were hired for the project and the suppliers were local to the region. And we know it's too early to estimate. We do know the economic impact of the expansion both at South Campus and the North will be very, very significant. The economic benefit in the short and long term is significant. So we're excited to say that the pre-capital submission, which is really just getting us at the starting gates of a long marathon to get these projects approved, has now in the government's hands as of January 29th, 2020, following a board meeting where the board of directors approved the pre-cap submission. With that, we are now ready to move into stages 1 through to 5. So we've spent 2 years, in a sense, working through a project with high consultation, excellent consultants, lots of feedback, and now we're ready to start the race of getting the projects approved. But we did seek Ministry of Health throughout our planning process, and so we believe that once the pre-cap is actually approved, we'll be able to move through some of these stages relatively quickly. We are confident that our plan is very aligned with the government's priority to end hallway medicine while integrating and streamlining care through the Ontario Health Team model. At a later date, we will submit a separate and distinct submission to government for the full-service South Campus model. Right now, we've submitted for the South Campus Health Hub and the North Tower and the Pre-Tower. And although the Pre-Tower South Campus Health Hub and North Tower Pre-Cap submission is separate from the future South Campus full hospital submission, I just can't stress enough that they're completely dependent on each other. We designed a two-campus, single corporation model. Barrie residents will come to the South Campus Health Hub for outpatient procedures, and Innisfil residents will still come up to the North Tower for more complex trauma incidents and surgical procedures requiring intensive care unit for the first 10 years of that model. If one doesn't proceed, the other one isn't large enough. If the other doesn't proceed, the other one isn't functional enough. So these are absolutely tied at the hip. It would be impossible to separate. They were not planned or designed to proceed independently. So the South Campus build and the North Campus redevelopment must both happen in order to meet the hospital needs of this region now and in the future. Community consultation has been foundational to our two-campus integrated model, and community feedback has informed every part of our planning process, including the South Campus location, the design of both the North and the South Campus, and the services offered at both sites. Our commitment from the very beginning was that our community consultation would not just be a check mark. It would be broad, inclusive, and most of all, genuine. I'm glad to see both Jessica and Carling here as two of the members of our corporation communications team who led many of these initiatives. We have logged over 27,500 engagement interactions over the past 2 years. I think really Suzanne Le Guin and her team have written the book on how to have a community consultation for a future hospital, because it is actually unprecedented in an Ontario hospital. We've consulted Team RVH, including our volunteers, partners in other education centers, patients, visitors, donors, the general public, diverse communities, including those most vulnerable in our society, and elected representatives. Our engagement approach was not a one-size-fits-all. We developed a strategy that provided many ways to hear from stakeholders, including community presentations and focus groups, a partner summit and expos, surveys, and social media polls. The innovative street team from RVH was out in our communities talking to parks, talking with people in parks and at beaches and festivals, and they also attended the Innisfil farmers markets. We engaged our volunteers equipped with iPads and our bedside entertainment system to survey patients and families in our health center. Those interactions have been informed every step of the planning process, and the thousands of stakeholders we spoke to, they will see themselves in our plan. Tonight we've provided you with a copy of our community report. The 16-page report talks about our consultation process, who we talked to, the comments and the feedback themes that we heard. This report was also submitted to government along with our pre-capital submission. In closing, RVH is excited about this project. We're excited about what it means for healthcare for our area residents, for the town of Innisfil. We're excited about the economic role RVH will continue to play in South Simcoe as one of its biggest employers. And we will continue to engage you, the residents, as well as we move through this planning process. I encourage you to learn more about our project and provide feedback by going to our dedicated website, rvhplanourfuture.ca. And now, with your permission, Mayor Dolan, I'd like to invite Barbara back to the podium in case there are any questions you'd like us to answer. And there's where we started, I guess, a little while ago, Mayor Dolan, with the groundbreaking, and that was our very first patient at the Rizzardo Health and Wellness Center back in December.
And that was a very cold day as well, if I recall.
Very cold day.
And I will tell you that as of March the 2nd, if you could tell all of your staff and patients at the Rizzardo Health and Wellness Center, they will have a place that they can have their lunch. A healthy restaurant is going to have their soft opening at the Hordinsky Community Kitchen. So, questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Davidson.
Thank you for the presentation. It was actually I really appreciate it. It was nice to be brought up to speed. My only concern is with getting enough doctors and healthcare providers for this as we grow the South Community Hospital. Do you see an improvement in getting doctors and physicians and healthcare providers available for it?
What I've been told is that although we had trouble keeping physicians or getting physicians into Innisfil prior to the opening of the Rizzardo, we weren't quite inundated, but there was quite an influx of individuals asking for opportunities to be part of the Rizzardo. I think, yes, I think there will be a strong interest in it. There are currently health practitioners from Innisfil who are commuting to Toronto, who would like the opportunity to stay in their own community and practice in their own community. So I think we haven't really tapped that group at all. But I also think this is, to be part of a brand new institution, it's pretty exciting, Dan.
Okay, so to follow up. So I know that Mayor Dolan's been quite involved with physician recruitment over the years that she's been working at it. And your opinion as well, that's my only concern, is getting enough people to build. It's a little point building it if we don't have the doctors, if we don't have the healthcare providers, that's all.
Would you like me to comment? We have this philosophy, build it and they will come. And we have, you might remember, Dr. Bryn Presnell was the only cancer doctor in the Barrie and Simcoe area for so many years. And once we built the cancer center, we now have 18 oncologists on staff, but we have more applicants than we can deal with. My little other example quickly is in cardiology. So we had Dr. Brad Dibble for years as the single cardiologist in the area. Then we built the cardiac units. We developed a whole program, and now we have 8 cardiologists serving Simcoe County region. We're about to go to a 24/7 model, which means our STEMI code patients, heart patients in heart attack will be able to bypass hospitals and come to our merge straight up to that unit and provide the life-saving care that we've been working on for over a decade. So I think the build it, they come philosophy, we've really been able to demonstrate that. There's going to be a health human resources shortage everywhere. And if we build an exciting model together for South Simcoe, it will be very attractive for our graduates to come to. It's a great place to live.
Councillor Sadi.
Thank you very much for the presentation and the update. When I was looking at the data that you provided on residents giving their preferences for locations, and I was just surprised with the low percentage for 6-line Elkona and higher for Yonge Street and the 400 corridor. Were there more input data from Barrie residents as opposed to Innisfil that I'm wondering if skewed this? And following that, how much does this input data play a part in you determining the location of that campus?
Thank you for the question. We had a little over 1,000 responses to the surveys. We were really excited about that. Close to half were Innisfil residents, but there were residents from Bradford, as well as Barrie residents and Springwater residents. So I think it was more dominated by the town of Innisfil residents, and I think the town had a strategy to ensure that residents did get out there and have their voices heard through the survey. It is not a criteria that we're using in terms of coming from the 47 sites to the 9 sites to our preferred site, but it was more of a weather barometer reading of what residents were thinking about when they could envision a South Campus and where it might belong. As it turns out, of course, the 4 zones that we're still looking at properties in also align with everyone's thoughts around where a hospital belongs. So I think that was very reassuring. The residents said from the beginning, access from Highway 400 and expanded Yonge Street are very important to them. So I wasn't really surprised to see the 400 corridor as being identified, and Bradford residents getting up there, or even anyone getting to that. And we don't have municipal boundaries in terms of the services we provide. We can provide services to anyone in the province of Ontario, but we better make sure that access to those services is relatively easy, particularly in a crisis situation. So I think it didn't surprise us, the information we received, but it wasn't a criteria weighting in terms of what the board will finally decide will be the final property.
Any other questions? I was reading in the paper today that Aurelia's also put in their pre-cap submission, and I'm sitting there thinking, hey, Aurelia, your population is less than ours. And, it just goes to show you that, and we're growing at a faster rate as well. So hopefully that will help. And I have a meeting tomorrow with the Minister of Health and Long-Term Care, so I'll put in a good word. So we've got a recommendation that we receive the presentation with thanks from Barb Love and from Janice Scott. And it's moved by Councillor Van Berkel and seconded by Councillor Orsatti. All in favor? Thank you very much for keeping us up to date, and we look forward to hearing from you again soon. Thank you. Our next presentation is from Jamie Brain, Clerk Services, and Wendy Riccardi. I say that one. I'm just going to call you Wendy. And this was about Share the Love on February the 14th.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Dolan, Deputy Mayor Davidson, members of council. My name is Jamie Brain. I'm with Clerk Services, and Wendy Riccardi from Communications. And we are here to tell you about the success we've had with the Town Share the Love promotion held on Friday, February 14th, Valentine's Day. On the day of, we had 4 staff members officiating the ceremonies. We had many staff members and members of council there to attend and offer their congratulations to the couples. Donations were received from No Frills O'Kona and Sobeys Alcona, and the Innisfil Idea Lab and Library supplied engraved commemorative glasses for each of the couples to celebrate their nuptials with a toast and a keepsake of their special day. A total of 8 couples came to Town Hall and joined hands and hearts to become husband and wife. The backdrop of the ceremonies and photo opportunities contained our new arbor and flower displays, which will also be used for any upcoming ceremonies here in council chambers and outside in the gazebo, weather permitting. Wendy will now tell you about the details of the ceremonies.
Thank you, Jamie. Through you, your worship, and members of council, there were many different types of ceremonies held during the event, including an elopement, a couple who have planned a symbolic ceremony at a later date, and some who have been in love for years finally wanting to make it official. Some were quiet and intimate, and some were large, had a large gathering with their family and friends, and all were personalized to the couple. Here is one of our happy couples, Stephanie and Patrick. Stephanie shared with us, Patrick and I were very impressed with our ceremony. We felt it fit perfect for what we wanted, and the words for the vows were amazing. We could have wrote them ourselves, they fit so well. Thank you for making our wedding special. The media also attended and shared the stories of love on both television and in the local papers. This photo was courtesy of Miriam King of Bradford Today.
Thank you, Wendy. We have a dedicated team behind this program, including Patty Toma, Deputy Clerk, Kevin Jacob and Kim Creamer, Assistant Clerks, and many facility staff that help bring the whole day together. In conclusion, we were able to donate $2,155 to the RVH Simcoe Muskoka Regional Heart Program, and we are very much looking forward to the Cardiac Respiratory Outpatient Clinic plan for the Rizzardo Health and Wellness Center, bringing care even closer to Innisfil residents. I will now ask council members to come forward to present the check to Janice Scott from the RVH, please.
Where would you like us?
Right up here. Okay.
take one more. 1, 2, 3.
Absolutely, yeah. Wendy, thank you for doing those.
Oh,
That was terrific.
thank you.
They did the services. Wendy did services.
I have it just occurred to me that the people who are watching online wouldn't have heard anything that just happened there, but I hope you can kind of gather what happened while we didn't have our mics on. So the recommendation is that the update from the Share the Love fundraising event held February the 14th be received with many thanks. Moved by Councillor Sadik, seconded by Councillor Fowler. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. That moves us to item 6, which is delegations. And this evening we have a delegation from Mr. Galen Pierce, and it's regarding the Innisfil Beach Park Master Plan. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Pierce.
Thank you. So thank you, Mayor Dolan, Deputy Mayor Davidson, and the members of council here tonight. The purposes of this short presentation is to introduce you to the draft Innisfil Beach Park Master Plan put before you in the staff report DSR 00420, and to highlight some of the key pieces of that plan. Oh, there we go. Do you know where to point? Oh, there it is. Thank you. And that will be an overview of the consultation to date, the highlight of several big moves in the plan, and a short discussion of next steps. Starting with the consultation piece, our consultations kicked off last summer. These were dubbed the Make Your Mark on Innisfil Beach Park Engagement Initiative. Planning staff partnered closely with our communications team to provide an unprecedented level of engagement for a park project in Innisfil. The engagement strategy employed several online engagement tools, including use of Get Involved Innisfil, extensive social media presence, and 917 survey responses coming back, primarily online. There were also opportunities for locals to speak with staff and view materials in person at one of two open houses. Some democracy events that we held, and some Dear Innisfil Beach Park letters, which were written from residents to the park. And then we also included tools for people with different communication styles and availability, so that we had some survey stations through town. We mailed 2,000 surveys to Alcona residents within a 5 or 10 minute walk of the park, and we had many outreach discussions. At every engagement initiative, we prioritize the voices of residents. Even at our most widely cast survey, which was advertised online and on billboards at the edges of our municipality, we found that the vast majority of respondents were residents, at more than 90% of respondents. So what we heard, it's impossible to summarize the thousands of comments we received in just a few minutes, but in short, we did amass a very vast data set of the preferences, concerns, use patterns, and the vision of residents. And it highlighted some major themes. I won't go into detail here, but we heard a lot about the operational challenges, the need for balance in the park, which manifests many different ways, ways to foster a culture of respect in the park, the need for more facilities, and the need for more comfort and safety in the park. And I would direct you to page 2 of the staff report, which provides a bit more detail of some of those key themes that we heard from the public. So I'll move on to an overview of some of the big moves. So there are initiatives that have the potential to change the way that the park, individual initiatives that have the potential to change the way that the park is experienced. Those are all listed in Chapter 4 of the draft master plan. There are also larger, more dominant park-wide changes, and I wanted to focus on those briefly tonight. You'll find details of these initiatives near the end of Chapter 4, where the projects generally affect a wider area of the park as a whole. So these are the move to create more destinations within the park, prioritize pedestrianization, relook at some of the roadway designs, and diversifying park landscapes. I'm going to go very quick through these because the staff report summarizes a lot of this content very well. But in an overview for creating destinations is the creation of alternate destinations in the park is a major focus of the plan. We've tried to group clusters of amenities to create tailored destinations for a wider range of user groups. This strategy is highlighted on page 5 of the staff report and in section 4 of the master plan. I'll skip over some discussion I was going to have, but it's well detailed in the plan. The next key move is pedestrianization. So over the long term, we should be walking more. It's healthier, it's more relaxing, we're more engaged with the people and places around us. And we see it, we staff see it as among the top steps to create a more balanced and pleasant park. The existing trail network is shown as expanded to vary and expand potential walking paths, dog walking routes, and potentially even a long enough pathway system for a short winter cross-country skiing loop. The road network is recommended for redesign through road narrowing, routing with one-way road sections, and some widenings on Innisfil Beach Road. The plan proposes a one-way in, two-way out scheme, which supports more control over park access and visitor occupancy control. Though future municipal parking in the downtown area is contemplated as the preferred solution for parking in the park and around the park, which is supported in the downtown Alcona parking study, parking lots are retained within the park plan. Changes to parking supported by future internal traffic and parking studies could include reducing the size of some lots by the lake, converting to alternate uses, and modernizing and greening some of those retained lots, introducing safe drop-off areas at key destinations, and adding some smaller new lots inside the park where justified and to satisfy specific needs at those placemaking destinations. Those are highlighted in gray. And one last major focus that I'd like to highlight is the potential to diversify the quality and character of landscapes in the park. Some ways that this is explored in the plan is incorporating landscaping and greening initiatives into every proposed project, resulting in fewer buildings that appear detached from the rest of the park landscape and park atmosphere. We would also look at expanding the naturalized area in the park, especially around the Bon Secours Creek, the Lake Simcoe shoreline, and the park edges. And we're looking at initiatives like the 1,000 Trees project, which is described in the plan, which contemplates shifting the predominant landscape in the park from open field with sparse trees to more diverse treed meadow landscape form throughout the park. So those are some of the ideas that you'll see in Staff Report DSR 00420, and we'll have the chance over the next several weeks to review in greater detail. We hope that you will feel welcome to touch base with planning staff around some of the concerns or questions that you might have, and I'm sure we'll hear from some of those tonight. And in terms of what's next and what's ongoing, staff are looking at clarifying some of the immediate and short-term projects that will inform the next budget cycles. We're hoping to receive feedback from you and from the public as well on the draft, which is actually on Get Involved Innisfil, and there's a planned update to residents. And then developing a short interactive Innisfil Beach Park Master Plan guide for the public in partnership with the communications team for the next time we come back to council. It's going to be sort of a bite-sized, more accessible document for the public. And lastly, we'll be considering for returning for consideration of the plan in early spring. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pierce. Now, the staff report is later on in the agenda, so I didn't know if council wanted to have that conversation now, or shall we just receive the report and then do it at the time? That's what I'm seeing nods at that, so we'll do that. So thank you again for the presentation, Mr. Pierce. And what I will ask, though, just one quick question. So you are receiving additional feedback on this draft. When's kind of the drop dead date when you'd need that feedback by in order for it to make it into the early spring consideration of council?
I think we have about 2 or 3 weeks before we start to have to having updates and reports from council. 2 or 3
Thank you.
weeks.
So let's say 2 weeks if it's at all possible. And I would urge people to, go through it. I know it's a large document, but it's also going to be the document that's going to inform us for many years. So go through it. Tell us what you don't like, but tell us what you do like as well. Would be nice. So with that, thank you very much. And the recommendation is that the Alcona Beach Master Plan be received as information, or the presentation be received as information, I should say. And that's moved by Councillor Van Berkel and seconded by Deputy Mayor Davidson. All those in favor? And that is carried. Next is County Council updates on different committees that you're assigned to. Is there any updates? I have 2 quick ones. The County Council did not meet this week because the Ontario Good Roads Conference was on, so most of the delegates or the county councils were delegates there. But I did have a Police Services Board meeting, and I would urge everybody to come out in May for the big Police Services Board or the police service open house that they have. I think you'll see in Sue Scambati's update that they've got a new piece of equipment that they're sharing with the fire department. It's a drone, and we got a demonstration of that at the board meeting, and it's going to make a huge impact. Not only finding hotspots and fires or going into hazardous areas, but also in search of missing persons. If it's got a camera on it with the heat sensor. So, I can think of 2 cases in the not so distant future where this drone would have come in very handy. So the only other meeting I had was with the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, and that's just to say that our medical officer of health, Dr. Gardner, is very heavily involved in the COVID-19 updates. He gets the updates from Ontario's medical officer of health every day, and so is very up to date on what's going on in there and keeping us very well informed. Any other updates? No? Okay. So next we'll go on to the consent list. So those of you who've been here before know the process. So we go through a list of items. If those items are pulled, then we'll have further discussion. If those items are not pulled, then you can assume at the end of the meeting that the recommendation that's in the staff report will end up being approved. And there is, I think, some agendas out by the counter if anybody wanted to follow along. So item A1 is the special council meeting dated February the 12th. Item A2, the minutes from the regular council meeting, February 12th. B1, the School Zone and Traffic Safety Advisory Committee report from Jan 28th. B2, the Innisfil Accessibility Advisory Committee. Staff reports, C1, the draft Innisfil Beach Park Master Plan, pulled by Councillor Orsatti. Staff report, revisions to real property acquisition policy. That is pulled by Councillor Fowler. Staff report, DSR, advancing the Webster Boulevard North Extension. Councillor Ices, did you want to refer that, or do you have a question?
I'll refer that to committee.
C4, the proposed new site alteration bylaw and guidelines. Councillor Van Berkel. C5, the sale of the turning circle, 2020 Craig Road. Okay. D1, the action tracking list update. There are no bylaws this evening. F1 would be the council discretionary fund for the Innisfil Garden Club. They do great work for the community. Next is the full list of correspondence. I won't go through it. Is there any items on the correspondence that anybody wanted to pull? So that would be, I'm asking now if there's any referrals or questions starting at G1 and going to G8. Councillor Seti?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just clarification on G2, the proclamation from the County of Simcoe, it starts month. If we just recognize that, that means that we are not recommending to clerks to have that in Innisfil. Is that my understanding, unless we know? Is that, just asking for clarification. So if it's just read as a correspondence, then that means that we are not pulling that item to proclaim March, it starts month. Can I just get clarification from
Sure.
clerks? Thank you.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I believe the item of correspondence was to advise us that the county is making that proclamation for the entire county, not asking us specifically to do it for Innisfil, but that it would apply to everyone.
And I think traditionally our libraries have all got on board with that, so I'm sure you'll hear about more of it at the next library board meeting you attend. Any other items in the correspondence list? None? Okay, then we'll have the consent list continued, the recommendation for the items we're pulling. That matches with my list as well. So can I have a mover and a seconder for the consent list recommendation, please? Councillor Fowler, Councillor Ices, all those in favor? That's carried. So next we will resolve into committee of the whole, and we need a recommendation to do that. And that is moved by Deputy Mayor Davidson and seconded by Councillor Fowler. All those in favor? That is carried. So we start with item C1, which was pulled by Councillor Donna Orsatti. Councillor Orsatti, if you want to open with the recommendation, and then feel free to ask any questions or have any comments you like.
Thank you very much. To pull this item, I have Deputy Mayor Dan Davidson as a seconder. Quite an extensive report. I wanted to start off with comments because I know that the item, the recommendation is to receive the report, and then it talks about the final comments coming back by the end of April. But I just had some comments in regards to this report and getting some further guidance, I guess, from planning, from Mr. Pierce and Ms. Nordstrom in regards to this. So looking at this report, a lot went through my mind. I felt that there's certainly a lot of time, a lot of work that went into this, but from the public open houses that I attended, listening to the residents, I felt that somewhere in this, to me, it got lost in translation. I feel that the report it's very innovative, but it's almost designing an Innisfil theme park. And our residents have told us consistently again that they want to make the park for residents first. And that was their priority. So I was surprised, and when I was reading the data in that, so as the Deputy Mayor says, to certainly talk about what we do like. I do like the 1,000-tree plan, the 100-tree canopy. I like the naturalized buffers. I like removing the boat launch from Innisfil Beach Park, the gardens, art, and seating. But I have grave concerns, 3 pages of, and so of concerns with this report for myself as a ward councillor that impacts this. And there is reference in this to the residential area that's under the interim control bylaw that goes along Innisfil Beach Road from 25th east to the lake, and those properties on lakelands. And it also talks about the laneways, driveways. So I have concerns with for the residents on the traffic. So I have many concerns on the commercial, the amenities, the settlements, and now you had mentioned, Mr. Pierce, about touching base with staff, and I'm just wondering, for those of us in council that have, like myself, maybe quite a few concerns, the best way to do that, to set up a meeting. And if we only have residents, only have 2 weeks to get the information. As of today, this document was not on the Get Involved Innisfil, so I'm wondering, unless residents went online to the agenda and pulled the document, how could they have access to read the document to give feedback? So if that could be made available to residents with a link, would be appreciated. I don't know if that's available. And rather than going through all the concerns that I have, taking the time tonight, I can certainly summarize them later and looking whether other councillors, giving them an option as well. But looking for, what is your recommendation for council to give our input into this, and how do we best go about doing that?
Mr. Pierce?
Thank you, Your Worship, to the councillor and all councillors for that matter. Yeah, I think if you have numerous concerns, and it is a very big document, I think there's a lot to talk about. The best approach would definitely be to reach out to me, and we can set up a meeting in person to go through your concerns one by one. Yeah, I would recommend that approach, and I can accommodate that certainly over the next two or 3 weeks.
Thank you. And I just wanted to point out, too, that this certainly wouldn't have been the first time that anyone would have done like this. We've been at this for how long? When did we have our first go at this, Mr. Pierce?
Well, I think the consultation opened up in July of last year, and I think our first council report with the vision and the principles was May of last year.
So yeah, but 2 open houses, surveys. So, and what else is in this document too is a list of every single comment that was made, and then the response to every single comment which made. So to me, that's unprecedented as far as engagement is concerned. But absolutely, you know, there's another kick at the can, but you know, what we've seen here is vastly different than what we first saw at the engagement back in July when we were all at the beach. Councillor Seti.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And this is taking everything. It's just that if we use the example in the document where everybody put little stickers on what they like and they don't like, it's like almost everything that they liked is thrown into this. So it would be like if I looked at my house and said, boy, I'd like to gut my kitchen, put in a new one. I'd like to add an extension on the back, pave my driveway, new landscaping. I can't afford it. This takes deep pockets, and there is recommendations in the report and how the town would be able to accomplish some of that by land exchange and retail opportunities. But it's taking all that further data, and I recognize the amount of work that staff have put into this. I'm just gobsmacked with the details and the impact that it's going to have to the residents. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Davidson.
Thank you. In having conversations with some of the constituents, listening to them, not my opinion, but theirs, and having a chat with Councillor Sadi this afternoon, as she says she sees it as a theme park, I see it as Taj Mahal. We have other parks in the municipality that need to be focused on, and one in particular is in Big Bay Point that was supposed to be completed a few years ago, and nothing's really moved on it, and I think it's slated for 2025. So in this project, we're going to be spending about $4 to $5, maybe $6 million enhancing it. We haven't fixed the current issues that we have there. We know there's a crime issue there as well that we have to face that we don't talk about. But why are we building the Taj Mahal in a park that already has a lot of problems and focusing everything in one area? We've also recently bought land on the 10th line that I've made clear that we don't do anything there for 10 years. And this is a 20-year plan almost. I really think we need to focus on other areas of the municipality first before we spend tens of millions of dollars. And why I say tens of millions, you've got the library just up the street, Town Square just up the street where I think we're spending $7 million. So if you look at just the park and the Town Square in Alcona, we're looking at almost $14 million easily spent. And we're not looking at the rest of the municipality where we have growth. So I'm going to wait to see what other comments come in the next open house, I think is April. We'll see what happens there, but I think we're reaching for the moon, or we've even shot past the moon, and I think we need to bring in our spending a little bit tighter and look after other needs in the community, parks as well.
Any other questions or comments? So I just wanted to clarify, there isn't an open house, it's when it comes back to council. So regarding the issues at the park that are happening now, I want you to know that there is a process that's happening currently. We have an Innisfil Beach Park Ad-Hoc committee. So the Ad-Hoc committee, ably chaired by Councillor Orsatti, is to deal with, reactive kind of issues that people have talked about that are happening in the park right now. But this plan, this isn't about, in next year's budget. This is a long-term plan. And if there's a list of things that that are talked about, but if there is no money to do it, then it'll get done later. But it's about planning for the long term. The Innisfil Beach Park is a park for everyone in our community. It is our signature park. We are doing lots and lots of work on other parks right now. I believe the road end in Big Bay Point is one of them, and Webster I think we're doing work on right now. And all of that work is being done in conjunction with this master plan for Innisfil Beach Park. Deputy Mayor Davidson.
I understand your point there. However, where I was going with this is that I did see in this report of one of, I think, so many pages, that they wanted to move it forward. It is a 20-year plan, but some initiatives want to be brought forward. And from 2022 to 2021, I saw that somewhere in here. And also I find it quite amusing about the 1,000 trees. I know that you were there for a photo op about 7 years ago when South Simcoe Streams Network went into the park and planted several hundreds of trees along the creek there, but also throughout the park, down on this shoreline as well. Trees were planted, shrubs were planted to the north of the park, of the beach. Also, several hundred trees were planted. And I know that tents have been set up where those trees are, and those trees and brush have all been knocked down, torn out, brought out. The ones on the beach don't even exist anymore. So it's nice to have a 1,000 Trees initiative, but when South Simcoe Streams Networks ask for money or startup money to do some work in the municipality, they're pushed aside. So I kind of find that humorous, the 1,000 Tree initiative in a park that we keep seeming, when you keep putting buildings in a park, you're taking down trees that are already there. You're not going to provide a park that's passive for the people. We know that parks help mental health issues quite strongly. Trees help mental health issues and greening of areas. What we're doing here is turning it into a theme park. And I really think we need to look at this over the next 2 weeks, listen to the constituents, see what they have to say about it. What is it they want, not what we want. And we'll take our decisions then and we'll hash it around. But I think we have to look at other areas of the municipality as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Ices?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just listening to the comments about the plan so far, it brings to mind a little bit the costs of this plan, and there was part of the plan was highlighted in the budgeting process of last year, where we were asked to discuss the docking system, the $2 million docking system. So I'm just wondering, that was already penciled into the budget. It kind of got put on hold when we started to wait for this master plan. So I guess my question is like prioritizing parts of this plan, is that because we would see these things come into the budget? Is that, from what I can tell, is that like the first thing that would come in because we've already discussed it at a funding level? Like what this is a long-term plan, but is there prioritizing, and how does that discussion occur?
Mr. Rayner?
Your Worship, members of council, thank you for the question, Councillor Ices. I think it's a great point to highlight the difference between a vision document like a master plan like this and an implementation plan. And there's a healthy tension, both internally and with the community, about how much detail is needed in a vision plan to get comfortable with the vision. At the same time, if you waited until you had all the details, we would spend years pricing and costing and doing geotech work in a place before you actually get to the vision document being released. So there's a healthy tension, and I just invite you to look back at our Trails Master Plan as an example. We had a number of discussions internally when that document came forward, because if you paid attention to the costing, it called for the acquisition of $30 million worth of trails, which we could not afford then, and I suspect we cannot afford now. But that doesn't stop us from having a vision of ultimately interconnecting our community through active transportation and passive transportation or passive recreation, and trying to begin to connect the dots of what is an ultimate vision for a Trails Master Plan. Similarly here, I think staff are trying to present and get the community to a point where everybody can buy into a vision, and then we'll unpack the implementation of that. And likely it will happen around our 2-year budget cycle. So Councillor Ices, rightly pointed out that we've been trying to placehold so that this council term could see some significant changes if you wanted them in the budget. But all of that is on hold, of course, until the overarching vision is done. The last thing we like to do is, put in a playground and then tear it down and put it in a parking lot. That's the last thing we want to do. So we want to make sure that vision there's alignment around that vision, and then you'll see us come back with an implementation plan. And the best master plans do dream big. They should be in the tens of millions of dollars category, because they are meant to be over decades. They're not meant to be implemented in a short period of time. But once that vision is adopted, Council, you have our commitment to come back to you as part of the 21-22 budgeting process with the specifics and the details of what can be implemented in that short-term period. Thank you, Worship.
Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I read this document fairly closely, and I came across the park vision statement. And it's very simple. It's a short vision statement that says, a short condensed expression of the long-term vision of the park. And that kind of explains it all in my mind. I mean, it's a long-term vision. And I think exactly what Mr. Raynard said. That doesn't mean that it's all going to happen today, and we're not going to spend millions of dollars today. We're trying to come up with a plan that will serve us over the long run, basically. And that's how I read it. I read, the planning principles and the planning framework. If I read those 3 statements, in my mind, that's what we're doing. We're not doing this tomorrow. We're looking at 20 or 30 years from now when this has all been implemented. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's the way I read it.
Councillor Setti?
Thank you. Just, I recognize it's a vision. It's just that the vision includes everything in one space was where my concerns are based on. And that it's too much in a park that many residents have continually said. And I know that there is feedback here. I'll be interested to see what the public has to say. So all those watching, go online and share your thoughts on council. We're certainly interested in that. But to me, I see a vision that has everything. A BMX, indoor parks, new buildings, 6-story buildings. You have, 100 launch docking system. It's a lot. That vision is a lot in that space when it's green space. So that was my concern, and it will continue to be.
Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's an old saying, a dream without a vision becomes a nightmare. You need a vision, with an end to it. And that's my point. I mean, we can change this vision 100 times between now and then. And none of it has to happen, but if you don't have a vision, it does become a nightmare. And, we need a starting point. That's what it is.
Thank you. I'm going to take a moment here and just say that we all heard through the election that the park wasn't working the way it is now. We heard that loud and clear. I think a lot of us did, that it was too crowded, the beaches were too crowded, there was charcoal on the ground, the bathrooms weren't good enough. So we embark on a vision to improve the park, understanding that if we do nothing, it isn't going to become a passive green park. It's still going to be overcrowded every weekend. It's still going to be, nothing's going to change unless we provide something. So right now we've got a park where everybody wants to be within 100 feet of the water because there's a whole bunch of park space farther back that nobody wants to be in it because there's not a park bench to sit down. It's just grass. There's no trees. There's no reason to be in that part of the park. So I think where I'm going is, people are saying, we don't like it the way it is, but we don't want it to change. And I'm struggling with that. What do you do? I mean, I know there's people in town who are saying, put a Trump wall around it and don't let anybody in except for people who live in town. But even then, this isn't a park just for people who can walk to it. This is a park for people who live in Churchill and people who live in Stroud and people who live in Guildford and people who live in Cookstown. It's the only part, for a lot of people in the municipality, it's the only access they have to the water. So regardless, the committee, the committee that Councillor Sadi, the Ad-Hoc committee that's looking at fixing short-term issues, is saying, and there's people on that committee are saying that, we need a better dock there. We can't dock, that they need a windbreak in order for that docking system to work. We've heard different things, but if we don't like the way it is, but we don't want to change it, I just don't know where we go. So get your comments into Mr. Pierce, and we might need a sit-down session at some point, maybe just go through it piece by piece. But definitely, we've got to hear from more than just the people who live beside it and are upset because they don't want anybody else to use it. And I think that particular part of is overrepresented in the entire engagement process. But I think it's got to be for everybody, and we can't just say close it and just let me and my dog walk there and don't let anybody else in. And that's where we got to go forward. And I think we have to look at what this is going to look like, because Innisfil is growing. And we are going to get to the point eventually where it isn't going to be big enough. But we're going to get to that topic next, so I won't go on there. But any other comments before we take a vote? Deputy Mayor Davidson.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I respect the vision aspect of it all. And I think the vision is supposed to be for the whole town, not just a particular area for parks. I think in reading the report, and you say it's just for the people in the area, but in the report it says we need another 640 to 670 parking spots. So that's for people coming from outside of the area walking to their park. Right now on weekends it's a disaster down there with traffic, and I'm pretty sure this year we did a no parking signs, and I think 300 signs or 100 signs were put up in the immediate area so nobody can park in those streets. So we're using the rover aspect, which is fantastic, I think, for trying to get people to park in respectable places. That's fine, to then walk to the park. But if you're going to have to provide 670 parking spots in the future to service Innisfil Beach, I see a 4-story parking garage probably happening on Alcona, somewhere in Innisfil Beach Road, which is prime land, so that's not the place to put a parking garage that we'll be managing. So when you say it's just for the people in the area, I don't think that we're all looking at it that way. But in the report, it states the required amount of parking is going to be required to service this park. And I don't think the residents down there want to see 670 cars plus coming down there every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So let's look at, we've got other parks, maybe we can spread it out a bit, not make this one the theme park of Innisfil. And we know that in many European countries and in many European cities, they are providing parklands and they're refurbishing. Look at downtown Toronto. I think it's, I'm going to say it's near Burnhamthorpe and the 427. There's a Square One Mall down there or something, and it's actually being demolished. And in it, they're showing a lot more park spots that they're going to build green space. So they're going backwards, and we seem to, they're going forwards, and we're going backwards with putting more buildings in a park where they're doing the opposite. So I don't think we're doing it just for a select few. Thanks.
No, I think you must have misunderstood me, Deputy Mayor. I said the park is for everyone, not just for a select few. But Mr. Pierce, can you tell me how many parking spots are added in this vision to Innisfil Beach Park?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked. So there are no specific numbers around additional parking in the park itself. I think the number you might be looking at is for the downtown Alcona study, which recommends that there could be additional spaces for the whole of Innisfil Beach Road between 20th and 25th. In fact, what we'd like to see over the long term is a reduction of parking within the park, specifically towards the water. And there are some potential smaller additional lots within the park just specifically to support some of those place-making destinations. But I would say overall a reduction over time. And if I could add just one more detail, sorry, Councillor Ices, you raised a really good point about the priorities, and Councillor Asadi as well, about the priorities of residents. It's certainly a very large vision, it's certainly a very detailed vision, and we have set a very high aspiration for the long-term plan. But in terms of shorter-term priorities, it's absolutely those core essentials. It's the washrooms that don't cut it. It's the traffic management that isn't cutting it. It's looking at parking specifically right away because we know it's not cutting it. And so you're going to see that within the individual projects in section 4 around what can we get started right away to tackle those issues, because that was something we heard resoundingly from the public last summer.
Thank you. Great discussion. Did you have another question, Councillor Sadi?
One final comment. Thank you for your leniency. And I agree, residents will be very happy to see, improved washrooms and addressing some of the overflow parking and that. But just the one thing that as the, Ward 3 councillor, that consistently I've heard in my ward, knocking on every single door, and from residents in other areas, that everybody heard on the election campaign, is that residents can't use their own park. So the more that we build it, the more amenities, the more it becomes, I think, attracting more tourists and visitors to the park. So it's that balance of that strain from residents being able to enjoy something in their own community to more pressure of of people coming to the park. And I know it's a 20-year vision. I just have that's my priority for the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. A lot of work and very much appreciated, and it's generated a lot of conversation, and that's always a good thing. So thank you for that. So the recommendation is on the floor. Is there a mover and a seconder? Oh, there already is. So all in favor of the recommendation? That's carried. All right, and next is item C2, and that was pulled by Councillor Fowler.
Just for the record, Councillor Van Berkel is my seconder for this. When we brought this up, I started looking at it, and
So are you moving and seconding this recommendation?
yes.
Okay.
My main concern with this is just the limited funds we have when it comes to land acquisition. We have a system in place that works with checks and balances currently, and the alterations that we're currently putting in place or looking to put into place, I'm not comfortable with. I just like things the way they are. In my opinion, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. So I spoke with Lee and actually I'd like to amend the motion, or if possible, so that we remove section 14 altogether, so that it doesn't change, that it stays as it currently is, and everything keeps flowing smoothly as we have it.
So motion to amend, so now the conversation is only about the motion to amend, is that right, Councillor? And is the same mover and seconder for the motion to amend? It is? It is? Okay, so now discussion only on the amendment, please. Any questions or comments? Councillor Ices?
Thank you, Worship. Just for clarification, so that's removing the $2 million limit. That's the gist of taking that section out. So I would speak against doing that. And I know there's lots of concern with council's hands being kind of twisted if a land offer were to come. But as a farmer who has to buy land in Innisfil, $2 million isn't very much. And you multiply that out on the lakeshore, all we're giving our staff is just an opportunity to help Innisfil get some more parkland in strategic places. So we're not, the way I see it, we're not looking to buy everybody's waterfront property. We're just trying to buy strategic stuff for our residents. And if it's a good deal, if it's a good property, and if it fits into our goals, like staff knows what our strategic plans are. They know, like we're just talking about this park, and we're going to talk about it for a long time. So that it's not like it's a surprise when it comes back to council to say, well, you know, we're going to buy this piece of property just because the CAO's nephew's brother or something might want to get something out of it. So I would speak against removing that, because I think in the world of Innisfil with real estate where it is, at least gives us a chance as a town to improve the spaces that we have, especially along the waterfront. If I did anything, I would take that waterfront word out of the property, but that's not part of this discussion. But so that's my comments on that.
Mr. Parkin.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to make a couple of very quick clarifications about the authority that's being proposed to be added simply to allow staff to negotiate an offer to purchase with a condition that it be subject to council approval. So we would always put that in our offers to purchase. That way council would have the opportunity to review and decide whether they wanted to continue with that. And it would be our job and legal department to make sure that those clauses are drafted in such a way that there is as much risk removed from backing out if that was necessary. And then just another piece of clarification, if we were to remove section 14, there were a couple of other housekeeping changes made to the policy. Those changes would remain, but that section 14 would be removed if this motion is carried.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? I just want to make a couple of comments because I think during the open forum, it kind of vilified the CAO, like there was some ulterior motive to do something against council's direction. And I can tell you it's been this council's direction for many, many, many terms to expand the access to Waterfront for our residents who are unable to access. The residents who live in Innisfil, the vast majority of them do not have access to Waterfront properties, and it has always been a strategic plan of council to allow that. So let's say we have a property on the 9th line or the 10th line, Leonard's Beach, I'll use it for an example, and a piece of property comes up for sale adjacent to that would allow us to expand that beach. Although it would be nice to be able to just say, let's have a council meeting, we can't do that. The Municipal Act doesn't allow that. We have to advertise it in the paper. We have to, how many days, Mr. Clerk or Madam Deputy Clerk, do we have to give notice before we have a meeting? 2 days notice, and it has to be advertised. We have to get a quorum into council. We have to say, yeah, go ahead and put an offer on that property. Then by that time, if it's a good deal, as Councillor Arce said, it's probably gone. I don't know of any, when you buy a piece of property, whether it's a house or something, it's almost always conditional to something. Selling your other house, finance, whatever. So I see this as just making it viable for when you do have the meeting. It's not to say, can I go and negotiate an offer? It's saying, now I've negotiated an offer and it's X number of dollars, are you interested or not? At which point council says yes or no, and it's always our decision. There was talk of expropriation. Expropriation is a last resort that this municipality uses, and there's a very high level of scrutiny through the, what do they call it, the court of, where you have to justify the need. And it has to be a need. It can't be just a, gee, we want that. It's got to be a need in order to expropriate. So nobody's suggesting that the CAO is going to run out and try to expropriate anyone's property. I think what's happened, and this is just my guess, is that there was, the issue with the interim control bylaw on lakelands, which had people I had people phoning me saying, don't expropriate my property. And there's been we've never even talked or thought about it. A, we couldn't afford it, and B, we'd never be able to prove that we needed it. So I think there's been a lot of misconceptions, or that there's some kind of a ulterior motive to this policy. But so I just wanted to say that I felt that, council's direction has been to staff, try to get us more, try to expand our access, and this policy came forward based on that direction from council. Any other comments? Councillor Seti.
So clarification then on this policy, because I did see it as the CAO or delegate going out to place in an offer on a waterfront property as a conditional offer, conditional that council approve the offer. So let's play this out. The CAO or delegate goes out, they come back, they have a conditional offer. Is that coming back to a council agenda, and the council and the public are no? Could you please walk us through that? Thank you.
Mr. Parkin.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, we would absolutely want to bring that to council in a closed session meeting. We are allowed to go into closed session meeting under the Municipal Act for discussion of acquisition or disposition of land. And in order to have that frank conversation as to the desire to acquire a piece of property, we would want to have that conversation in closed session. That way there's, not other parties listening in, and we can have that frank conversation. It would also reduce our risk of a challenge if we decided to not proceed and terminate the offer to purchase.
And if I could just be clear to say that's exactly what we do now. We never talk about the disposition or the purchase of property in open session. And we have that discussion and then we come out at the end after we've decided whether or not it's a good idea, and then we come out into open session, and that's the way we have always done it. What this does is reduce one step. Instead of having two closed sessions, yes, go ahead and make an offer, and then yes, we want it, or no, we don't want it, based on whatever was negotiated. It says one meeting, which says, here's an offer, are you interested or not? And council makes a decision based on that. Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to know, have we ever lost a deal because staff didn't have the authority to negotiate $2 million?
Your Worship, I can't think of an example off the top of my head where that's been the case, but I know there's properties out there that.
No. Has council, have you ever lost a deal?
So, again, I'm not aware of an example.
If we had Mr. Inwood here, he's the one who brings most of the deals to us. So if we had him here, I'm sure he could answer that question, but unfortunately.
Personally, I think, the way it is without that clause 14, that it would be just right.
I don't think it's a hill to die on today, but anyway, Councillor Fowler.
One thing that keeps on coming up, I think there's maybe a miscommunication. It says once the offer to purchase has been accepted. So the negotiation occurs, the person then commits to selling this particular piece of property conditionally to the town. I'm sorry, as far as I'm concerned, we do it for every other piece of property. This should be the same. It falls under the same premise. It falls under the same idea. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, again, we're messing with something that already works. I think that right now, the way things are going, it's a system that works, it's a system that's reliable, it's a system that keeps everybody accountable, councillors and staff, and it's just that simple. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
But Councillor Fowler, it was broke, and there's other things in there that were fixed. So you're not suggesting that they go back the way they were either, just this one piece. Okay. Councillor Rossetti.
Thank you. So I'll start off with, although I got new hearing aids, I did not hear the last comment from Councillor Van Berkel. If you could just repeat that one, and then I have a question for staff.
I asked staff if we ever lost a deal because they didn't have $2 million worth of. And your final comment? Then my final comment was, yeah, exactly. They haven't ever lost a deal.
And my question for staff is this proposed policy in place in any other municipalities?
Mr. Parkin?
Your Worship, we haven't gone out and surveyed other municipalities to see if this, and to clarify, you're asking about the specific authority for waterfront properties, right? Right, we're not sure if that exact authority is in other policies. Other municipalities certainly have acquisition and disposition policies, and in most cases there would be some delegation of authority to staff, or usually for small amount. purchases, but can't say that this specific item would be found in another policy.
My experience has been the larger the municipality, the larger amount that is delegated to staff authority. Any other questions or comments before we vote on the amendment? All in favor of the amendment? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's carried. So now we vote on the amendment, motion as amended. Do we need a new mover and a seconder for that? No? Okay. All in favor of the motion as amended? That's carried. Next is item C3, and that was Councillor Ices.
Webster. Yeah. Thank you, Worship. I've got Councillor Ossadi seconding my deferring this to this committee. So I definitely am in favor of moving along this road construction in light of what the county had proposed back last fall, I believe, when they came with plans to for the rail crossing, that they would restrict vehicle traffic north on the 20th Side Road. So in light of that being a possibility, I'm just wondering if that changes the design of this road. Does it change our thoughts on how it affects residents? That would be my one question. And then another question, I guess, would be, as a farmer in Innisfil, if we can't get up that 20th Side Road with equipment and Webster is opened up as an arterial road to the north, will the road be designed to accommodate such equipment? And so what is our vision for this construction? Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. McKenzie.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Ices. Your first question, we sent some letters to the county from our fire department and identifying our concerns with the intersection at IBR and our Innisfil Beach Road and 20th. And since then, the county's consultant has contacted us for all of our background traffic. They're looking at redesigning their original proposal because council here had concerns. So I'm not sure where the schedule for that is. We have not seen a redesign come back, or the county has not met with us yet to discuss our concerns. But the town's intent is to have the 20th not blocked like it was originally proposed. We would like to see maybe a more signalized intersection there to control traffic on both legs of the 20th that meet Innisfil Beach Road. So to move into the second question, right now we're assuming that it won't be blocked. So then Webster would not be designed as an arterial road at this point. It would be a major collector road, the same as it is now. The difference is an arterial road is 30 meters wide, a major collector is 26 meters wide. So it would be the same as it is now, continued and swung out to the west to meet 20th Side Road. I'm not sure, as part of the planning process, we could look at, the width of farm equipment, but you might get constrained where the existing Webster Road is now with bike lanes and on-street parking. So I think the intent is to have 20th remain as the arterial road, and eventually it will get realigned in the long-term planning for Alcona.
Thank you for that. I guess my question would be the what-if question, if the county decides to block that road, because that was their plan, and we haven't. I know there's discussion. So, are you are we nimble enough in the planning that, are we going to find that out soon, or are they going to, are they going to consult and design for another year, and then we've started designing this road, and then it's blocked, and then it's not, the road isn't sufficient for our residents? I guess that's my another question I had.
Mr. McKenzie?
Yes, if we assume that it stays blocked, we still have an existing condition on Webster where it is now. So even if we designed the new section of Webster wide enough for farm equipment, you would be constrained with the existing portion that's in place right now, with houses on it, bike lanes, parking lanes. Unless you can get equipment through there now, we'd have to look at the whole length of Webster down to Innisfil Beach Road, and that's not part of the scope of this project. The ultimate goal is to have 20th wide enough and swing out west to accommodate. Maybe if the county comes back and blocks that, we start prioritizing that project.
Okay, that makes sense to me. The only question I had, if you take the farm equipment question out of it, if there is more traffic having to run through that road because the 20th is blocked, would you design it differently, even though you know that you're going to have more volume? So that would be a question that I would have.
It would be designed as our second highest volume road, which is a major collector. There was never an intent to make Webster an arterial road, so it would be the same as it is now, just pushed out further. It was shown, I believe, in a 2011 secondary plan for Alcona North, so it's always been identified to be punched through to the 20th, and that traffic has always been considered, when that gets opened up, it will generate more traffic through there, but it is categorized as a major collector now.
Okay, thank you.
I can tell you that we had a good meeting with the county and gave them some compelling reasons why we thought it shouldn't be blocked to north traffic. The good news is they didn't just say no, they said they'd go back and look at it. The bad news is it put it off a year. So that's why it wasn't in the schedule for, I think it was scheduled originally for this year, wasn't it? So now it won't be this year. But I did have the opportunity to talk to the consultant working on the project and ask them how they were doing with it, and let her know as well how important it was to us. So hopefully it'll be a good news story when we hear back from the county. Any other questions or comments on this file? Councillor Sadi.
Thank you. Just a comment that I think providing residents with a connection, a safe one along Webster to the 20th can't happen soon enough, because residents are always concerned and trying to get out on the 20th onto IBR, especially if they're trying to make an turning east. I've witnessed myself a couple, thank heavens, not serious accidents, but the difficulty is also the close proximity to the railroad tracks and getting stuck in that between the Trinity Square lights and the railroad tracks, and traffic trying to get in and out, and it really is a situation. So the sooner that we can provide alternative, transportation route for residents is going to make a lot of people happy. It actually came up in a discussion in a meet and greet I had with residents on Innisfil Beach Road last night.
Thank you. And just to manage expectations, though, for anybody who thinks this is to do the EA, this is not construction. So I just don't want anybody watching to think that, we're going to have that road built this year. Be nice, but it just doesn't work that way. Okay, all in favor of the recommendation as printed? That is carried. And the next item is C4, and that's Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you. I think Deputy Mayor was going to second it, yeah. I understand what we're doing here, and we do really need to look at this bylaw, but I was hoping just to add a little bit to it that we consult with our development community, simply because I think they're going to be the ones that are mostly affected by this law with their cut and fill and, import and export of soils. And it would probably eliminate a lot of problems in the future when drawings are approved and, we raise elevations, and then when it's actually done, somebody come along, bylaws, and say, no, you can't do this because the bylaw says. So I think that if we get them involved in it, that we would come up with a pretty good bylaw. I understand that you need to do something with it in lieu of what's been happening in the town over the last couple of years. So I'm not opposed to the bylaw. I just want more input from the development community. And those are my...
Thank you. Any comments from the seconder? No. Councillor Ices?
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I would agree with Councillor Van Berkel that with all the projects that are happening, there's a lot of dirt that is topsoil and fill that's moved. As a farmer, we get approached to assist in that, and because it does benefit our fields if we can put some topsoil in those low areas where the water sits, we can grow more crops. So there's benefits there. So I would caution staff that we've identified what we don't want. We don't want smaller areas that become a bit of a dumping ground for fill, because it can be lucrative as the economics of driving a truck closer is obviously better than further away. So that's where we see in other municipalities, and we've seen it in ours too, where we get these piles of fill or soil that is out of place, and someone has benefited from it, and it interferes with the neighbors and everything else. So I guess I would suggest that we just make sure we make a good bylaw. There's lots of details to this one. Thanks.
Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I would like to have that added to the motion there where it says public consultation, that we include our development community.
And is the seconder in agreement with that? Mr. Kane.
Just to buy the clerks a little bit of time, I think they're done now, but the first point of contact with the development community can happen as early as next week. We have our quarterly development liaison group meeting, which was put together years ago to talk about collective issues exactly like this one. So we'll certainly add that to the agenda to initiate that process and continue consulting as the bylaw develops.
Councillor Orsatti.
Thank you. And I noticed in the report that it talks about 3 long-term, well-established garden supply businesses within the town limits. Would they also be included in that consultation, or at least discussions with them in regards to this? Because I think we need to involve our businesses and make sure that they're aware.
Mr. Moore.
Through your worship to Councillor Orsatti, they would be included in the external consultation of the new bylaw, and they would be requirements for, fill heights, slopes, seeding, to eliminate the problems that we've experienced with the garden centers in the past.
Okay, my turn. Sit back, everybody. No, so there's parts of it I love, the gap analysis, the right of entry, the tree removal piece, I get that, and the garden centers. You know, the reason we have such a strict bylaw right now is probably has a lot to do with me. Being an advocate for it because of what we've been through in this municipality. It was the wild, wild west. We had fill dumps, fill brokers everywhere in the municipality, driving residents out of the municipality and also causing havoc, and still is causing havoc in parts of our municipality currently. You'll see that ESSA has just decided to be more stringent, much more stringent, and I would say that I had a part of doing that because in order for them to get to ESSA, they have to come through Innisfil, and they're causing, if you talk to Dickie B. Honey and mention dump trucks, you better have an hour because they have about 1,400 go by their door every day that they're doing fill. So my concern is she will see me as a bit of a hypocrite as soon as I talked Mayor McDonald into bringing something more stringent to their council to stop what's happening there, that you know, we move back into a permitting process. And there is a, as Councillor Ices mentioned, this can be very, very lucrative. There's people in our municipality who've made millions and millions of dollars taking fill. They get paid $60-ish a load for every load that they dump. And there's people who bought farms who, for the sole purpose of being a fill dump. And you know, there's loopholes in Mono Township. They had, they were taken to the Right to Farm Tribunal, and they got a permit. There's some gray area around aerodromes, and we've had an aerodrome in Guildford who wants thousands and thousands and thousands of loads. So while I want to fix what's wrong with it, I'm really concerned about going too far, and if there's $1 million at stake, they're going to look long and hard to find that one loophole in the bylaw. And so we're going to have to be very cautious. I understand that the province, after years and years and years of nagging, have come up with excess soil guidelines, which is admirable. But I would also say that when push comes to shove and you say to the province, you know, are you guys, make sure the contractors are following the guidelines? My guess is that they won't have the enforcement part of it that will be attached to the new guidelines. There's places in Scugog Township, they were actually the excess soil advocates that came out against it the most. There's a place closer to home in New Tecumseh. It's an old aerodrome, and there's cyanide on that property now, and it's going to be in the lawsuit for years. And in our own municipality, we've got issues with thousands of loads of fill going into valleys with no compaction tests, no soil testing, blocking roads, ruining roads. That is the other issue. Just today, there was a tweet from South Simcoe Police because somebody phoned them on Saturday to tell them about a bunch of dump trucks that were speeding through our municipality. And they did do a safety blitz, and it's quite appalling the number of trucks that get taken off the road due to having safety issues. And they're paid by the load. So they're in a hurry to get to where they're going. So I don't want to have to become a full-time follower of dump trucks again, because that was my full-time job for a few years. But I ranted on enough. Mr. Moore, did you have to comment?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. updating the bylaw would give staff the ability to regulate, haul routes, timing of trucks, and the amount of trucks. So we wouldn't, we could regulate the time, such as, we don't want hauling happening during raining days to eliminate dust. Enforcement is going to be a problem, but giving this bylaw an update will allow staff to have that ability to regulate in our permit. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a question, Mr. Moore. So if you got an application for a site alteration and it was, on the second line of Innisfil, lot number 5, and they said they needed whatever, fill in the blank, whatever excuse you needed. We need a driveway, and that driveway is 100 feet deep and 300 feet wide. Would they get a permit for that?
Currently, under the current bylaw, they would not, because it's not an agricultural use. With this new permit, it would have to be for a beneficial purpose. And so that's really the specific. Although it allows anybody to apply for a permit, it's not necessarily you're going to get it. It has to be for a beneficial purpose. So people who want to build berms or want to build large driveways, they won't. And we can make, and just something to add, we can make this bylaw as stringent as we want to, and it's going to be, consulted with internal and external, as well as, have councillors a chance to review it. Thank you.
Okay, you're making me scared, but anyway, we'll see what comes back. Got a mover and a seconder. All in favor of the recommendation as amended? Do we need a separate one? No, it's not a motion to amend. It's just a friendly amendment. Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't see the hands. Opposed? That's carried. And a recommendation to rise. And that would be moved by Deputy Mayor Davidson, seconded by Councillor Orsatti. All those in favor? Councillor Fowler, there you go. All in favor again, let's call it. Hands up, everybody. There we go. Opposed? That's carried. Recommendations at the Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted. Moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Councillor Ices. All those in favor? That's carried. Notice of motion. Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I think I had a conversation with you earlier tonight. You wanted to add something to this motion?
Yeah, but if you want to get it on the floor,
I'll get it on the
who's
floor.
your seconder?
Seconder. Thank Kenneth Fowler. Councillor Fowler, sorry. Do you want me to read it? Or?
No, you don't need to read it. Just, do you have a comment on it?
Let me read it again here. My concern, it's my opinion and my concern that with the constituents that we need to look a little closer at what we're doing to Lake Simcoe, how we're going to impact it in the future. I'm aware of different municipalities who need to or want to enhance their water treatment plants. And I'm just concerned that we need to bring awareness to the Minister of the Environment, who I have met with personally, and requesting that we look at the future plans for Lake Simcoe. And I think in our conversation, Mayor, this afternoon, and my conversation with the CEO of the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority, Mike Walters, that I had a long conversation with him about my concerns for Lake Simcoe, which he agrees there are some concerns, and that maybe we need to look at bringing the municipalities around the lake, the counties, the region, all together and come up with a vision for the future of Lake Simcoe for the next 30 years. So with conversation with Mayor Dolan this afternoon, I'd like to add to this notice of motion that we invite Mike Walters to our council to do a presentation on the concerns of Lake Simcoe and where we're going to go. And I think one of the conversations I had with him, that the last time there was a group consultation regarding Lake Simcoe was when they were dealing with acid rain, and it was going back almost 30 years. So it's been a long time since we've looked at really what do we want to do with Lake Simcoe and where do we want to go in the future with it? Do we want to pave it over and make it a parking lot? So I think we need to look at that very carefully now. So that's the only addition I see is item E, is that the CEO from Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority attends council and gives us a presentation on Lake Simcoe and what's happening there now.
As whenever he can, I guess, is at his convenience. Any questions or comments on the recommendation? Mr. Rayner.
Your worship, members of council, I just want to clarify the intention. So the motion is for us to prepare a letter to the Minister of the Environment to ask the Minister to do a number of things, including consider the servicing needs of our municipality from the expected growth. And I suspect that Minister Urick's staff will reach out to me to understand the context and what it is that we're looking for the minister to action out of this. And perhaps the Deputy Mayor and I could have a further chat. We certainly talked before this meeting, but that clause D is the only one that concerns me as we plan for a significant amount of growth in our community. And the master servicing plan is currently before the minister and under a bump up request. So just want to make sure that we're not colliding too many issues in front of the minister related to our growth. So D is the only one that concerns me, Your Worship, members of council. Thank you.
Thank you, and I understand that concern. I think when I had this conversation with several people over the last 6 weeks or 8 weeks, several meetings, trust me, and we need to look, I'm sorry, not so much we, the province needs to look at alternative technology that's out there. And instead of doing the same thing time after time of putting a pipe into a lake to get rid of wastewater, even though it's clean and you can drink from it right away with a glass or whatever, it's clear. There is new technology. It's being used in many European cities who don't have lakes to dump their wastewater. And some of that technology has been presented to this council. Maybe with the 400 corridor and how we want to service it, we could look at new technology. And also with other new projects possibly coming on board that can deal with sludge, which puts a big impact on wastewater treatment plants, and that sludge takes up space. So with new technology coming forward, we need to tell Queen's Park, or the bureaucrats at Queen's Park, start looking at new technology, start looking at new ways. Don't just do the same thing over and over and over. It's time for change. And I think Minister Urick is smart enough in talking with him. He understands there's new technology out there. But again, it's what he receives from his staff of what alternatives there are. We need to use new alternatives to getting rid of wastewater. We know they're out there. It may save the taxpayers of Innisfil tens of millions of dollars if we look at alternative technology and alternative ways. And I know I've spoken to Mayor Dolan and yourself regarding a municipality east of here that has some technology in place and is currently servicing 500 homes. So with that technology, we could expand on it. I'm just saying it's time that the province looks at new technology and ways.
I wonder if I could suggest a friendly amendment then, Deputy Mayor, as item D, instead of saying consider the servicing needs of our municipality, say consider new and evolving technology for all municipalities.
Okay, I want the way that Lynn's going with it, but I want it for all municipalities. So consider the servicing needs using new technology for all municipalities surrounding Lake Simcoe with expecting growth. And I think that sends a message to all the municipalities around Lake Simcoe, start looking, start requesting that the province looks at new technology and it allows it.
Mr. Rader?
Sorry, Your Worship, just one follow-up. I suspect one of the questions that will come back from Mr. Ministeric is what is it that Innisfil is doing in this regard? And so you don't have to add it to the motion, but certainly we'll engage in services on this. They're currently, my recollection is In-Services is currently doing a peer review of an alternative technology solution around water, wastewater for the 400 corridor and the Churchill area in particular. So we are engaged, and I'll certainly share this with the President, Wally Malcolm, and the board.
Other questions or comments on this? Go ahead, Councillor Icy.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, Mr. Rayner, I guess from I'm a fan of what Innisfil has done with the Listec technology. So if we had other municipalities going that route, I think of our neighbor to the north, that would be just that technology alone. There's stuff that's already there. So I wouldn't go any further than what we are doing. So.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's a kind of an apple pie and motherhood statement letter. I'm no concern with that. I believe that the province is doing all of the things that we're asking them to do. I have a bit of a problem with directing another level of government on how to do their business because, I don't know, it just seems a bit like we should stay in our own lane, but I'm not opposed to it. It's definitely motherhood and apple pie. So, any other comments? No, seeing none. All in favor of the motion? Those opposed? That's 2 opposed.
Oh, no, I'm not opposed.
No, were you opposed? Okay.
All in favor?
All in favor.
All in favor. It's carried. Okay, and now we have 2 notices of motion for next meeting, so we'll just save those. They're just declaring notice. One from Councillor Ices and one from Councillor Nickel that we'll be dealing with at our March 11th meeting. And now we're on to announcements. Anyone have any announcements? Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a reminder that tomorrow is the viewing and the funeral for Mrs. Hoffland, who was a longtime resident of Lefroy. Her husband, Max, who was the chief for the fire department of Lefroy, died with a heart attack at one of the fires. Her son, Craig, also died of cancer as a fireman, and her brother-in-law, Doug Hoffland. So she's had a long history in this town and a few heartaches. And I just wanted to remind everybody that, you know, if you have a chance, go down there and see Ruthie.
Deputy Mayor Davidson.
Yes, I actually had the opportunity on Friday night to attend Hospice Barrie, their fundraiser that they had in Barrie. It's my first time going to one of those functions and hearing some of the stories and the benefits of hospice. And if I'm corrected, that costs $1,600 a month for their food, and that food is also for the family members that attend and visitors and such like that. And if I understand, they raised all 12 months of funding, plus they raised several tens of thousands of dollars with the silent auction. So it's nice to see, and we know that people from Innisfil do use Hospice Barrie, so it was kind of an honor to be there. Thank you.
Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I have a few items. This past week has been many things going on. I was able to attend one of our great annual traditions in Innisfil, the polar dip on Saturday, and I was just amazed by the number of people. If you didn't see the pictures from it or whatever, there was so many people on the ice that the water came up, the ice was moving a little bit, so there was a little concern there for a little while, but we had all the right people there if something were going to happen. But there was over 40 people that jumped in, and it was for a great cause for the Innisfil Food Bank. So it was a great community event to witness. Another thing that's going on in my ward, very soon there will be, I guess I should back up a little bit. The building where the Stroud doctors used to have, it's been transformed into a contemporary art gallery, and that's going to be opening in the near future. So a great thing for culture in the town, where some of our local artists can show off their work. Then the last thing that I was involved with this week, I was able to attend the Ontario Good Roads Association annual conference. I just got back today, and it was a good mix of municipal officials and staff, and we talked about the infrastructure in Ontario. One of the highlights was for me to hear our very own Jason Inwood talk about the orbit in the net zero growth session. Some of our goals as council and as a community to think in a different way about our environment and about how we house people. So that was another thumbs up for Innisfil, and there was lots of good comments about that upcoming project. So those are the things that I've been involved with recently.
Thank you very much, Councillor Arces. Yeah, it was almost a very, very big polar bear dip. Almost all the people there observing almost went into. Councillor Sadi.
Thank you. Just checking my calendar here. It sometimes becomes a blur. I did have the pleasure of attending a new business, 9 rounds, in Ward 4, just off Webster and IBR. And it was lovely to see, attended with other councillors, and also met some young representatives, 2 young girls representing Innisfil in a competition that empowers females and gives them confidence as well. So it was a great opportunity to meet them, and I was quite impressed with the 2 owners of the facility that had decided to open up a business in Innisfil with them only half an hour of being able to do fitness, but I don't know that I could I could make 1 round, station 1. Just for the libraries, just that their March calendars are out, and it's a good idea for anyone who's looking at remembering that March break. There's a lot of events for families and children at the libraries at all locations. So I encourage residents to grab one of those brochures, go online and take a look at it, and don't leave it too late to sign up for some. Many of them are free, and others it's a minimal cost, and it's a great opportunity to have some family fun. Whether it's grandchildren, nieces, nephews, or just pop in as a counselor if you just want a moment, and then to have that quiet space afterwards.
Thank you. Councillor Fowler.
I'm just letting everybody know that come next week, we're going to be starting up the committee for the pitching again, pitching day. It's that time of year. We're going to be starting the planning, and I just want everyone to know that what we did last year, I hope we can meet the same expectations and maybe even exceed it this year. So kudos to everybody who's getting involved, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of things that I'd like to bring up. We raised the 200th anniversary flag, and there's a rather full and busy event guide that is going to be, it's going to be a very busy year for all of us. So we'll keep adding to that, I'm sure, but it's wonderful to see. I ask you all to take a moment to see the sculpture that's in the front lobby that has been added, and there'll be more of those. The sculpture day is coming up in April. I received from the Innisfil Beach car cruisers a lovely plaque in recognition and thanking council for all of the being a sponsor and helping them with their charity fundraiser, and was astounded to see the list of the people that they actually give money to. And there's a long, long list. I won't go through all of them because I don't think Ms. Creamer would like me very much, but they really do give back to their community, and their pet project is the accessibility park, which they are raising funds for. The, what else did I want to tell you? Oh, I guess the last thing was second last thing, I was a guest on a show called Hitting Home. It's a Rogers TV show with former councillor Arif Khan and Mike Montague to talk about the orbit, and it airs on, I think, Monday nights just before the Barrie Council meeting on that show. And then finally, I just want to congratulate the town of Innisfil on winning the Municipal World Alliance for Innovation, and it was announced today that they won that award. It was the Innisfil's Rover Initiative, which won it. It's a national contest. There were 2 winners in Canada. There was the City of Yellowknife and ourselves. So we've done really well. We not only get the recognition, but we also get a scholarship to send people down to the technology, and I've lost the name of the emerging technology. Help me, Mr. Rayner. What's it called?
Your Worship, it's the TLG conference, the Transforming Local Government Conference. And if I could, I just want to thank Nicole Bowman and Mr. Inwood for their hard work on this project. And Mr. Inwood and I will be presenting it in Arizona. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great recognition. And I would just like to say that the runners-up were the City of Edmonton, the City of Calgary, and the town of Whitchurch-Stouffville. So we're really punching above our weight here, and it was great to get, again, more national recognition for our innovative programs. So since then, I'll ask for a motion to, oh, sorry, Councillor Fowler.
When you brought up awards and innovations, I just want to give recognition quickly to the Innisfil Farmers Market. They were awarded the...
They're going to come and do it themselves on March the 11th, so let's not steal their thunder.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other announcements? Sorry to cut you off, but we've talked to the Farmers Market Committee, and they're coming on March the 11th to do a presentation. Okay, so the confirming bylaw. Oh, sorry, I should have asked if there's anything from the municipality. Mr. Keogh, Mr. Rayner, any announcements? No? Okay. The confirming bylaw, moved by Councillor Van Berkel and seconded by Deputy Mayor Davidson. All those in favor? That's carried. And adjournment. Who wants to move for adjournment? It's Councillor Nicol. Oh, he's not here. Councillor Van Berkel and Councillor Fowler. All those in favor? That's carried. It was a heavy agenda tonight, everyone, so thank you very much for sticking with it. Good conversation, and we'll see you on March the 11th.